I moved to Maplewood last year, thinking it would be my quiet escape. I'm 32, a freelance graphic designer. I imagined the charm of this small town would spark my creativity. At first, everything seemed fine. The houses were beautiful, and the town square was a picture from a postcard. But there was something about the locals that felt off. On my third night, I lay in bed. The house was quiet, or it should have been. Then I heard it, a thumping noise next door. I thought maybe it was renovations. I rolled over, trying to block it out, but the sound just persisted. My heart raced a bit. Should I peek out the window? I hesitated, deciding against it, and just lay there. The thumping continued for days. It grew louder at night. I heard muffled voices but couldn't make out any words. I convinced myself I was imagining things. That's when I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, an elderly woman, wandering her yard at odd hours. It felt odd, like she was watching me, but maybe that's just how small towns are. One night, I worked late. The thumping was still there, but I pushed through my design project. The clock ticked loudly, and a feeling of dread started creeping in. I glanced out the window again and saw the lights flickering in Mrs. Wilkins' house. I expected to see her moving around inside, but it was dark. I felt a chill go through me and thought maybe I was just being silly. But then the thumping changed. It was louder, more rhythmic. I wondered what Mrs. Wilkins was up to. My fear shifted to a desire for confrontation. I was nervous but thought, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe I was just overthinking everything. Late one night, the noises turned from thumping to quick knocks and whispering sounds. I felt paralyzed. Why didn't I call the police? That felt too extreme. I thought I was losing my mind. But I had to know. Hesitant, I stepped outside. The yard was dark, and I felt watched. I approached Mrs. Wilkins's door and knocked, my hand shaking. I waited, anxiety building. Something rustled inside. My heart raced. I turned to leave when I saw her, standing in the shadows. I couldn't see her face, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. "What do you want?" she rasped. Her voice was chilling. Suddenly there was silence, heavy and thick. I turned to check behind me, but only darkness stared back. Had I imagined her voice? The fear clung to me. I rushed back to my house, locking the door tight. I couldn't sleep that night. The thumping returned, louder than ever. I lay in bed, terrified. I still wonder what goes on in that house next door, what Mrs. Wilkins was doing. I thought I sought peace in Maplewood, but now I just feel trapped. Every time I hear the thumping, I shiver. I wonder if I made a mistake moving here. The next day was bleak. I could barely focus on my work. Each click of the mouse only reminded me of the whispers and knocks from the night before. I needed to do something. I had to discover what was going on. I decided to visit Mrs. Wilkins during the day. Perhaps it would help clear my mind. I pulled myself together, taking a deep breath. The sun was high, lighting up the neighborhood. Maybe I could just ask her about the sounds. She might feel less threatened in daylight, and perhaps I wouldn't feel so scared. As I walked over, I spotted Mrs. Wilkins in her yard. She was planting flowers, beds of white petunias. An odd choice for someone who had been lurking in darkness. I hesitated but pushed forward. I needed answers. "Hi, Mrs. Wilkins," I called out, forcing a smile. She looked up, a bit startled. "Hello, dear," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "What can I do for you?" I took a step closer. "I was wondering if everything was okay. I've been hearing some noises at night from your house." Her eyes narrowed. "Noises? I don't hear anything." "Right," I said slowly. "Well, it sounded like thumping and whispers." She straightened and pulled her gardening gloves off. "You live next door?" "Yeah, I moved in last year." "Aren't you a bit lonely living here? It's a quiet town." I was hoping it would be peaceful. I felt a bit vulnerable saying that. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You should leave it alone. Sometimes it's better not to ask questions." The weight of her words hit me. I wanted to demand more, but something in her tone sent chills down my spine. Was she implying something sinister? Before I could respond, she smiled, a strained, toothy grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Come by for tea sometime, if you want." "Sure," I said, half-heartedly. "I must finish these flowers." She hurriedly turned back to her work. I felt dismissed. As I walked back home, unease washed over me. What was she hiding? And why was she planting flowers in such a strange manner? The eerie feeling settled in my gut. Once inside, I couldn't shake the thought. I needed proof of what was happening next door. I settled at my desk and stared out the window at Mrs. Wilkins. I watched her through the glass as she moved back and forth, her hands working the soil. Suddenly she straightened up and turned to look directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. Did I imagine it, or did she see me watching? Her expression was unreadable. I was about to pull away when I noticed something behind her. A dark shape darting into the shadows of her house. My heart raced. That shouldn't be there. Then it struck me. What if there was more to Mrs. Wilkins than met the eye? That evening, I heard the thumping again. It echoed in time with my pulse. I needed to know what that shape was. I needed to confront her again. But now, a new thought gnawed at me. Was she dangerous? I got up, feeling the pull of curiosity mixed with dread. I slipped on my shoes as the thumping intensified, reverberating through the walls of my home. Maybe I was in over my head. But as that noise echoed again, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I wanted answers. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. I had to see. As I approached her house, the lights flickered once more. Suddenly, it all went dark. I stood frozen on the path, the air thick with an unsettling silence. My heart thudded in my chest, louder than the noise I had been hearing. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I debated whether to turn back. Maybe approaching her home wasn't a good idea, especially now, in complete shadow. Then I heard it again, the thumping. This time, it was louder, punctuating the silence like a heartbeat. My instincts screamed to run, but curiosity chained me to the spot. I took a small step forward, hoping to blend into the shadow of the house. I moved cautiously toward a window that was barely illuminated by the flickering streetlight on the far side. Peering through the glass, I could see Mrs. Wilkins's figure standing in the middle of the living room. She seemed to be muttering to herself, her voice rising and falling in a strange rhythm that sent shivers up my spine. For a moment, I thought about knocking on the door. After all, I wanted answers. But then I remembered her expression from the garden, the way she dismissed me, how her smile had felt more like a warning. I heard another noise, different this time, mechanical, like something grinding. It cut through the thumping and made my stomach churn. Fear spiked as I imagined what could be happening inside that dimly lit room. Then, without warning, the sound stopped. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. I felt an urgent need to get further away, but I was rooted to the spot. That was when I noticed movement. A darker shape shifted behind Mrs. Wilkins. My heart sank, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I squinted, trying to make out what it was. Was it an animal? No. This shape was too big, irregular in a way that made my pulse quicken. Suddenly, Mrs. Wilkins turned toward me, as if sensing my gaze, her eyes wide and eerily bright even in the dark. I ducked low, hoping she hadn't seen me. "Leave me be!" she yelled suddenly, her voice piercing the silence and sending ice through my veins. "Go home!" I felt a rush of panic. My mind raced, forming an escape plan while my feet felt glued to the ground. I was intruding, trespassing on something that wasn't my business. But the thought of leaving without answers propelled me forward. I needed to know what was happening. As I hesitated at the edge of the yard, I stumbled upon a flower pot that broke under my foot, shattering on the ground. The noise shattered the stillness, echoing around me. I winced. Mrs. Wilkins turned sharply, panic flushing over her face as she rushed toward the door. "Who's there?" With no time to think, I darted behind a thick bush just as she swung the door open. The night was thick with tension. I held my breath, waiting for what might come next. Then, against the backdrop of her open doorway, I finally saw it. A long shadow crept out, and I knew. A presence was stepping into the light. Someone was in the house. I pressed my back against the cool earth, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stay completely quiet and still. My eyes darted between the open door and the figure that emerged into the dim glow of the porch light. The figure was tall and unsteady, almost swaying on its feet. My breath hitching, I peered closer through the tangled branches of the bush. It was a man, his face shadowed but unmistakable in his awkward movements. He was dressed in a long coat that swirled around his legs as he stepped forward. "Is anyone out here?" the man called out, his voice low and gravelly. It sent shivers down my spine. I recognized him, Mr. Gleason, the neighbor 2 doors down. He often worked late shifts at the factory and rarely came out in the evenings. Mrs. Wilkins' eyes widened as she spotted him. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her tone dangerously sharp. "I could ask you the same," Mr. Gleason replied. He took another step closer, glancing nervously at the yard. "You know it's not safe to be out at this hour." For a few seconds, they seemed to be caught in a strange standoff, the tension crackling around them. I held my breath, unsure of what would happen next. My instincts urged me to slip away, but I couldn't tear my gaze from their strange interaction. Then Mrs. Wilkins made a sudden movement, shoving her hands into the pockets of her apron. "You need to go back inside. It's not your business." The air felt thick with hidden secrets, and I strained to hear their conversation. What were they hiding? My heart sank as I realized I may have stumbled onto something far more sinister than I imagined. Mr. Gleason stepped even closer, his posture tense. "I saw you in the living room. What were you doing with it?" It hit me like a punch. With it. What was it? My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. I felt a sense of dread creeping in. Mrs. Wilkins' lips pressed into a thin line. "I told you to stay away, Gleason. You don't understand." Then something shifted from behind the curtain in the living room. I glanced back at the house, adrenaline racing through me as my instincts clawed at my mind. I had to know what was hidden inside. But if they were talking about a thing that needed to be hidden, there was more to this than curiosity. Suddenly, the light inside flickered, and I feared it would go out completely. But then, just as quickly, it intensified, throwing the inside of the house into stark relief. I gasped when I spotted the shape again. The dark figure in the corner, shifting slightly. "Enough of this!" Mr. Gleason shouted, breaking the silence and startling me. Before I had time to react, he rushed toward the door. My heart raced as realization hit me. He was going in. I couldn't let him see me, but I couldn't look away either. Then everything changed. The door slammed shut behind him, and all at once the light inside flickered out. I was surrounded by darkness, my pulse quickening as panic engulfed me. I couldn't just stand by anymore. I needed to know what was happening, and a feeling deep within me knew I was already in too deep to escape. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, feeling the rough bark of the tree grate against my back. The chilling darkness wrapped around me, muffling the sounds of the world outside. I strained to hear what was happening inside the house. Footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, punctuating the silence that lingered after Mr. Gleason entered. My heart raced as I imagined him confronting Mrs. Wilkins. What were they fighting about? Suddenly, a loud crash resonated from within. I flinched, instinctively biting my lip to stop from whimpering. Adrenaline surged through me, urging me to stay. I leaned forward, scanning the windows, desperate to catch a glimpse of what unfolded. That's when I saw it. The shape in the corner was no longer still. It shifted, and I felt the blood drain from my face as a faint glimmer reflected off something in its hand. My heartbeat quickened, a frantic staccato in my ears. I wanted to flee, to run home where it was safe, but I was rooted in curiosity. I needed answers. I glanced around, weighing my options. The bushes offered good cover, but the risk of being seen was too great. Steeling my nerves, I crawled closer to the edge of the porch, the fresh scent of damp earth filling my senses. I peered through the crack in the curtains just in time to see Mrs. Wilkins shove something small and dark into a drawer before slamming it shut. Her face was a mask of fear as she glanced toward the door. She looked frantic. "Mr. Gleason, please. You can't just barge in here like this," she begged. "Do you think I care about your stupid warnings?" he shot back. "I need to know what's going on." Their voices crescendoed, but then the air shifted. A sharp silence fell, heavy and suffocating. I held my breath, dreading what might come next. Instead of shouting, a low murmur bounced between them. "What have you done?" Mr. Gleason's voice trembled. "It was the only way to save us," Mrs. Wilkins replied, her tone eerily calm. My spine tingled with unease. Save them from what? My mind raced with possibilities, a sense of dread weaving itself into my imagination. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Then, without warning, the front door swung open again. I froze in place, hardly daring to breathe. I pressed against the rough wood of the porch, praying I wouldn't be seen. "Get out! You don't belong here!" Mrs. Wilkins shouted, her voice sharper than before. I barely had time to react as Mr. Gleason stumbled out, backing away from her. His eyes were wide, frantic with panic. When he turned his back to me, I caught a glimpse of something glimmering in his hand. A knife. I gasped, covering my mouth just in time. The tension in the air felt electric. I knew something terrible was about to happen. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I made a decision. I would sneak inside, find out what was happening, and unravel the mystery that had sucked me into this tangled nightmare. As I crouched behind a nearby tree, I heard a door slam shut again, isolating me in the quiet. That's when I noticed a flicker of movement inside the house. My heart sank again. Someone else was in there, and I had to hurry before it was too late. My heart pounded as I slipped away from the tree and moved toward the house. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel it pulling me in. I pressed my ear against the door, hoping to catch any sound from within, but all I could hear was my own anxious breathing. I took a step back, considering whether to knock or just barge in. But something stopped me, the thought of what I might find inside. There were too many questions, and I wasn't prepared for answers I might not want. Still, I couldn't walk away. I had to know what was going on between Mrs. Wilkins and Mr. Gleason. Gathering what little courage I had, I grasped the doorknob and twisted it slowly. The door creaked open, barely making a sound. I slipped inside, my senses on high alert. The dim light felt suffocating. The living room was empty, no sign of Mr. Gleason or Mrs. Wilkins. I looked around, the decor an odd mix of floral patterns and covered furniture that gave off a stale air. My eyes landed on the drawer Mrs. Wilkins had slammed shut. It sat ajar now, tempting me with its secrets. I approached it cautiously, my breath hitching in my throat. The drawer whispered of mysteries lurking within. I glanced back at the entrance. There was no one in sight. I could either keep looking or retreat, but for now, curiosity won. I pulled the drawer open, revealing a jumble of papers, a small box, and a faded photograph. My fingers trembled as I reached for the photo. It showed a group of people standing in front of an old house, not unlike this one. But something felt off. The faces were shadowed, their features obscured. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were somehow watching me. That's when I heard it, footsteps approaching. I froze, clenching the photo tightly, heart racing. I ducked behind the couch, which reeked of musty dust. Whoever was coming was not Mr. Gleason or Mrs. Wilkins. They had returned to the house, and I was trapped. The footsteps grew louder, a heavy tread against the wooden floorboards. I bit my lip, trying to suppress the growing anxiety in my chest. If I was caught now, I wouldn't have any explanations ready. The footsteps stopped just outside the room, and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't come in. Then the door swung open. A tall figure loomed. I squinted through the narrow space between the couch and the wall, my heart thrumming in my ears. The figure stepped inside, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a woman I hadn't expected to see. "Mrs. Wilkins," I whispered, but I quickly realized it wasn't just her face. There was something different about her. She looked distressed, but that wasn't what caught my attention. In her hands, she was holding something. The same glimmering object I had seen in Mr. Gleason's hand. And just like that, the ground beneath me felt unstable. I hadn't just stumbled into a confrontation. I had walked into a twisted puzzle that made the danger I felt outside seem harmless in comparison. With every second that passed, the tension rose. I had to make a decision fast. Stay hidden or confront the chaos head-on. But I knew one thing for sure. I had crossed a line, and whatever unfolded next could change everything. Mrs. Wilkins stepped further into the room, my heart racing with each second that ticked by. I could barely make out her expression, but the way her eyes darted around told me she was fearful, perhaps even desperate. The glimmering object in her hand caught the feeble light, and I squinted, trying to discern what it was. She paced slowly, her gaze shifting as if she expected someone else to appear. I held my breath and waited, torn between fear and the need to know what was happening. Had Mr. Gleason sent her here? Were they in trouble? "Please," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep it here anymore. It's too risky." What was she talking about? It took everything I had not to leap out of my hiding spot. The tension in the air felt suffocating, and every instinct told me to stay quiet, to remain unseen. Just then, a loud bang echoed from somewhere deep within the house, and Mrs. Wilkins froze, clutching the object tighter. Her wide eyes darted toward the source of the noise, and I felt a rush of panic. Someone else was here. My mind raced. Was it Mr. Gleason returning, or something worse? I shifted slightly, trying to peek past the couch when she abruptly turned, as if sensing my presence. I held my breath. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice now laced with fear. No. This could not happen now. I couldn't be caught. The room was silent. She took a few tentative steps forward, still glancing behind her, anxiety hanging thick in the air. That's when I noticed the item she held, the glowing thing, an ornate dagger or a knife of sorts, adorned with strange symbols. "Mrs. Wilkins, listen!" I suddenly blurted out, unable to keep silent any longer. The shock of my own voice startled me, but there was no turning back now. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm not here to hurt you." She turned sharply, eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. "What are you doing here?" The intensity in her voice sent a jolt through me. I was just looking for answers," I stammered. "I saw Mr. Gleason. He was acting strange, and I had to know what you two were involved in." Her expression shifted from fear to understanding, if only for a moment. "You shouldn't have come here. You need to go. Please." Before she could finish her sentence, another loud crash sounded from the hallway, followed by angry voices raised in confrontation. I felt a chill trickle down my spine as my instincts screamed that this situation was spiraling out of control. "Not now!" Mrs. Wilkins hissed, her grip on the dagger tightening. I watched in bewilderment as she glanced at the drawer I had opened. Her eyes were frantic. "We have to leave. They're coming." Suddenly, her resolve took charge as she stepped toward the door, looking back at me with a mix of urgency and fear. "Are you coming or not?" I glanced toward the doorway, the growing sounds of chaos pushing deeper into the house, and realized there was no way to back out now. "Yes, I don't know what's going on, but I can't stay here," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. As she rushed to the door, I felt a thrill of both dread and adrenaline. As we darted through the entrance, I could already hear footsteps behind us, and I knew we were not alone. Whatever was happening now was just the beginning, and I could only hope that I wasn't stepping into a trap far worse than I imagined. As we burst through the door, the world outside felt strangely calm compared to the chaos inside. Chilling winds whipped through the narrow alley beside the house, making me shiver. I didn't have time to focus on the cold. "Where do we go?" I gasped, glancing back at the darkened house, fear gripping my throat. Mrs. Wilkins hesitated for just a second, her brow furrowing in worry. "Follow me!" she urged, her voice determined. She dashed to the right, blending into the shadows of the alleyway. I sprinted after her, heart racing, adrenaline fueling my every step. After a few moments, we reached a small, abandoned shed. It was tucked away under a cluster of overgrown bushes, almost hidden from view. I paused, looking back at the house, my mind racing. The voices were getting louder, echoing like the growl of a storm. We couldn't stop now. Mrs. Wilkins opened the door just wide enough for both of us to slip inside. The musty air surrounded us, but I was too wired to notice. "What's happening?" I hissed, resting against the door as she closed it quietly behind us. The darkness inside the shed was thick, but I could make out her silhouette, a tension gripping her frame. "That dagger," she started, her voice trembling. "It's not just an ordinary object, it belongs to them." She pointed toward the house, eyes wide. "They want it back." "Who are they?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. My questions tumbled out faster than my ability to process them. "They're part of a group that—" She paused, her breathing shallow. "That believes in dark rituals. I thought I could keep it hidden, but they must have found out." I reeled back, trying to digest her words. "What kind of rituals? And why do they want you?" Suddenly, loud voices seeped through the walls of the shed. They were angry, shouting fragments that blurred together. "Find them! They can't get away!" One voice was especially authoritative, punctuated by a heavy thud that sent a jolt through my body. "Damn it!" Mrs. Wilkins muttered, her eyes darting around the shed. "We have to figure out our next move. It's not safe here for long." As she spoke, a flicker of light caught my eye, moving across a crack in the shed's wooden walls. I leaned in closer, and that's when I saw it, a shadowy figure creeping along the side of the house. My heart raced. "There's someone out there," I whispered, my stomach twisting. Mrs. Wilkins' face paled as she turned. "No, it can't be," she said, her voice trailing off. "If they find us—" The tension in the air felt charged. Whatever was happening, it was speeding up, and I knew we had only moments to decide what to do next. In that instant, a realization hit me harder than the cold air outside. I had walked into something far darker than I could have ever imagined, and now we were trapped in a game of cat and mouse. "We need to get out of here." My voice was low, yet urgent. Now. But as she reached for the handle, the shed door rattled violently. A voice boomed from the outside. "We know you're in there. This is your only chance to hand it over." My breath hitched as dread clawed at my insides. I glanced at Mrs. Wilkins. "What do we do?" The sound of footsteps grew closer. We were running out of time. Mrs. Wilkins's face hardened as she glanced at me. "We can't let them in. If they find the dagger, or us—" Her voice trailed off, but I could feel the weight of her fear hanging in the air. I took a shaky breath. "Then what? We can't just stay here." Before she could respond, the door rattled again. "You have 5 seconds," the voice warned. "This is your last warning." My instinct kicked in. I grabbed Mrs. Wilkins's arm. "We need a way out. Is there another door?" She shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. "No, but we can hide. There's a small space behind the shelves." I glanced at the shelves piled high with dusty old tools and scraps. "It's better than getting caught," I said, and together we scrambled to the back, wedging ourselves in the cramped space. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart racing. I could hardly breathe, the scent of damp wood and rust overwhelming me. Mrs. Wilkins was beside me, her eyes wide, straining to listen. "We can't make a sound," she whispered, and I nodded, terrified that any noise would give us away. The footsteps grew louder as they approached the shed. My mind spiraled with questions. Who were these people? What did they want with the dagger? And why was Mrs. Wilkins so involved in this mess? A heavy thud struck the door, causing Mrs. Wilkins to flinch. "They're going to break it down," she hissed, and I could feel her fear radiating off her in waves. "Keep quiet," I whispered back, trying to stay calm. I could barely hear what the intruders were saying over the pounding of my heart and the weight of silence. Suddenly, the door burst open with a loud creak, splintering the dark air. Light flooded the shed, illuminating our hiding place. I held my breath, hardly daring to move. "Search everywhere," a voice ordered. "Split up! They can't go far!" Heavy footsteps thudded against the floorboards, sending chills up my spine. I could hear them rummaging through old boxes, overturning tools, the sound of their frustration echoing in my ears. A man's voice shouted, "They must be here! Get the dagger! We can't lose them again!" The urgency in his tone set my nerves on fire. I exchanged a worried glance with Mrs. Wilkins. If they didn't find the dagger, our escape might rely on them getting distracted. As the search continued, a near-light source glinted on the edge of the shelf next to us. My heart raced as I recognized the shape of a knife, what looked like a dagger. That's when I realized they weren't just looking for us. The dagger they sought was in the shed. I caught Mrs. Wilkins's gaze and gestured towards the blade. "What do we do if they find it?" I mouthed, desperate for an answer. Her face was pale. "We have to make a run for it," she whispered, gauging the moment. And then, as if the very air in the shed leaned forward, the man's voice shot through the clutter. "They're in here. I found something." Time froze. We had no choice now. It was either escape or become victims of this chaotic hunt. The shadows closed in around us, and we had to act or face the darkness head-on. I could feel the weight of Mrs. Wilkins's fear as I pressed against the shelves, my heart racing. The tension in the air was so thick it felt suffocating. In that instant, something primal kicked in. We had to move or risk their discovery. "On 3, I whispered, my throat dry. I glanced at her and she nodded slightly, fear flitting across her face. 1, I counted in my head, adrenaline surging. 2, I gripped her hand tightly, waiting for what felt like an eternity. 3, in one swift motion we erupted from our hiding space, darting toward the door. "Over there!" someone shouted as I caught a glimpse of a hulking figure through the doorway. I shoved Mrs. Wilkins ahead of me as we bolted into the night. As soon as we crossed the threshold, the night air hit me like a gale, invigorating yet utterly terrifying. "Run!" I shouted, pushing her in the direction of the street. The voices behind us roared in rage, echoing through the night. I didn't dare look back, fear propelling us forward. We sprinted down the road, the cold air biting at my skin. Houses loomed like shadows on either side, but every step felt like breaking free from a suffocating dream. "They'll follow us!" Mrs. Wilkins gasped, glancing over her shoulder. Panic surged in my chest, urging me to keep moving. We ducked into an alley, pressing ourselves against the damp brick wall as we tried to catch our breath. The distant shouts from the shed faded in the night, but I knew it wouldn't last. "We need to find a place to hide," I urged, looking both ways. "Why do they want that dagger?" "It's connected to their ancient rituals," she whispered urgently. "It gives power to those who can wield it, but it's a curse." A sudden realization cut through my fear like a bright light. "Wait, you were the one with it?" Mrs. Wilkins' expression darkened. I thought I could protect myself, but it only brought them closer. Panic swirled in my stomach. What had I stepped into? Every moment in that town echoed with unreality, a string of events leading me here. "If I can just get to the car." "Your car?" Her brow furrowed. "We can't go back where they'll look." Before I could argue, a shadow flickered across the alley entrance. an encroaching figure crept into view, and it sent a wave of dread through me. "Hide!" Mrs. Wilkins hissed, pulling me further into the darkness. We pressed against the wall, hearts racing as the figure stepped closer. The clattering of footsteps echoed ominously. My fingers curled against the brick as I held my breath, wishing for the shelter of shadows to swallow us whole. "Where did they go?" The voice was gruff, searching, seething with the promise of danger. Each moment stretched taut with the tension of the unknown, and I glanced sideways at Mrs. Wilkins. Her eyes were wide with a mix of fear and knowing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever might happen next held even darker revelations than I had feared. "Over there!" another voice shouted suddenly, cutting through the air like a knife. A jolt of adrenaline coursed through me as we sprang into motion. Instinct kicked in, and so did the will to survive. With no plan other than forward, we stumbled out of the alley and into the street, hearing shouts from behind, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop, desperately seeking an escape route, my mind racing with the dark winds of uncertainty. Then, as if the world slowed down, Mrs. Wilkins collapsed against the side of a car, clutching her side in pain. "Keep going," she gasped. "I'll hold them back." "No!" I shouted, fear flooding my senses. But before I could reach her, she turned and gasped, "Just get away. Get the dagger outside the town." A dark figure began to emerge from the shadows behind her, and I felt a pull deep within me, a choice to make: stay and fight, or trust her and run. But it was no longer just about the dagger. It was about uncovering the mystery, deciding where the true danger lay. I hesitated for a breath, looking back. Mrs. Wilkins was staring defiantly at the approaching figure, her resolve igniting a flicker of hope. I turned away, panic in my chest, as I sprinted toward the distant lights at the end of the street. The pounding footsteps echoed behind me, mingling with the sounds of chaos and uncertainty. I didn't know what lay ahead, whether I would find answers or further doom. But as I sprinted away, I realized I couldn't turn back. I would have to confront the shadows of Maplewood alone, and no matter the cost, I had to find my way out and face whatever flickered just beyond the door of the unknown. As the town fell away behind me, I could still hear the distant cries, the weight of hidden truths shrouded in darkness. But in that moment, I chose to escape, the mystery promising a darkness yet to unfold. I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes I wonder if my neighbor is still there, if those things still happen. But mostly, I try not to think about it.